Okay, hello and welcome, Chris here. And in this video, we're going to start looking at how we find Facebook interest and how we start to actually create and prepare our Facebook campaign. So, first thing that we'll want to do, that we've kind of already touched on this actually in the niche selection stage, is we want to enter broad keywords into Facebook ads to kind of start us off. So what's the keyword about? What's the niche about? It's about firefighters. Okay, then type in firefighter, fire department. Maybe go to Google and look at some names of fire departments. Maybe search on the internet a little bit and see what the big fire websites are called. Type in firefighter magazine, firefighter blog, and basically just put these really broad sort of general keywords into Facebook and see what comes up. And again, this is something that really we should have looked at in the first step. So, even before we get to this, we should have a good rough idea of kind of where our niche is kind of centered, really. And then we want to find interests with an audience size on Facebook of between 100,000 and 1 million people. And that's kind of our sweet spot. We go bigger than that, it's too broad. We go smaller than that, it's targeted, but we might not make it, a really good amount of money from it. And that's kind of the basics, and this is already what we've prepared in the niche selection stage. So we're already going into this with kind of the basics already down. But what I'm going to touch on in some of these videos is some more advanced ways of digging up interests and really refining our campaigns. So one advanced tool is to use the Audience Insights tool, which is kind of this really cool piece of software within Facebook ads that lets you put like a keyword in and see like firefighter, and see the demographics of the people who like that particular interest, their age, the gender, the location, other related interests and things that they might also like. So you'll put firefighter in and it'll suggest firefighter magazine and fire department New York and all these different kind of useful things. They've even got some really cool advanced stuff, like they'll suggest like the income, the average income of the people, if the audience is big enough, all kinds of other cool stuff, composition of the household, percentage that are married, all kinds of really insightful things. And it's good because it kind of gives you a picture of what your audience is. Audience Insights is also really good because it lets you basically very quickly brainstorm other related interests. You can just put a single interest in there and you can find lots of other interests that come up that relate to that first one that you've put in. So if you don't know a lot about a niche, you can just put a keyword in firefighter Labrador, and Facebook will say, well, here are some related things that people who like Labradors also like. And that can be really useful, especially if you don't understand a niche. So, Audience Insights is a cool place to do brainstorming. You can also run Google searches, even though we're dealing with Facebook, and even though it's tempting to think, well, let's just stick within Facebook and use Audience Insights because it's all about Facebook and it's their data. Google's a monster when it comes to crawling the internet and finding out which websites relate to particular search terms. And consequently, you can go to Google and you can put in firefighter and see what comes up. Then put in firefighter magazine, see what comes up, firefighter association, firefighter products, firefighter shopping, and basically just a laundry list of all these terms. See which websites appear, and you can even put in like firefighter, slang, and see which phrases appear, and then build up like a list of keywords that you've pulled from Google. Some of which can be like websites, some of which can be people or places, and just drop them into Facebook ads and see what comes up. So Google's really good to kind of brainstorm these ideas alongside Audience Insights as well, and then we can just put those into into Facebook ads and see what comes up. Demographics, so we've talked about interests, so we've just really focused on what are the words that the interests, the words that we should be targeting by. But one of the cool things with Facebook, of course, is you can target by demographics. And these can get like super duper advanced. You can target like married women aged 36 to 39 who live in Wisconsin and have got a child aged 0 to 3, and you can just like have ludicrous layers and layers of data. But really, when I say demographics here, we're still thinking on kind of a basic profile level. And so really what I mean is a general age and a gender. So if you're targeting firefighters, most firefighters I think are going to be like 25 and up really. So you'd probably put like 25 to 50. most firefighters are going to be male. Certainly not all of them. There's a growing number of female firefighters, but nonetheless, most are going to be male. If you were targeting mechanics, again, you'd probably target like maybe 21 male. Again, most of them are going to be male. If you were targeting makeup technicians or beauticians or whatever, they're probably going to be female. If you were targeting firefighter moms, so mothers of firefighters, you'd probably target women aged maybe 50 and up who are parents. So when I say kind of demographics, I'm not saying go like super like Jedi at this stage. Don't have like massive assumptions about the market. Just go in and with a broad kind of targeting demographic, and let's run with that. Also, speaking very generally, I like to aim for a slightly older age. So, a lot of people will start with age 18 and up. I like to go older. I like to kind of go 21 as my default age. So if I don't, have any presumptions about the market, let's say I was targeting writers, and writers can be male or female, they can be old or young. And there's no reason to think that they're going to be older or younger or more likely to be male or female. Well, then what I'll do is I'll just set an age of 21 and up. So they can be anywhere from 21 up to like, 100 or whatever. Some more ideas on finding Facebook interests. Graph search is pretty cool. It's this thing on Facebook where you can basically do all these crazy searches. It kind of launched, I think, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that, and it lets you do searches like people who like cornflakes and like Britney Spears, and you'll just put it in, and like 10,000 people will come up, and you'll be like, that's that's absolutely mental, or people who have visited Amsterdam and like house music and like tattoos, and like 30,000 people will come up. And what we can use it for in this case is we can use it for putting in searches like people who like firefighters, um, or sorry, we can put in a search which will be pages like firefighters or pages that people who like firefighters like. And there's all these different searches we can do with graph search that kind of throw up more ideas. You won't see that many people use it that much because everyone kind of uses audience insights nowadays, but it's still a cool tool to have, just to play around with. It's really fun. If you're in the US, you probably already got it. If you're not in the US, you probably will have to request it. And the way to do that is to change your language to English US, and then just Google, graph search, see if it, click on the first result for Facebook graph search, and it'll be like you'll have to request an invite, do it, you'll probably get access within a couple of days. But don't worry about graph search too much. As I've mentioned, Google is very, very cool. So put in the keyword and see what comes up. So put in mechanic and see what comes up, and then also put in, mechanic products, mechanic associations, mechanic magazines, mechanic forums, clothing, fan pages. If it's applicable, so if it was like, say, we're targeting like, you know, dentists or something, well, probably to be a dentist you're going to have to get like certain qualifications, and so it's helpful to think in terms of, well, if there's a particular dental school, well, presumably people who like that will have been to the dental school. I mean, I'm not a dentist. I'm not going to go around liking, a dental school. I might like, for example, Colgate toothpaste, but I'm not going to like, Wisconsin Dental School or something like that. So these can be really sort of targeted terms. And for kind of professions, especially professions that involve a lot of qualifications, a lot of formal education, so, teachers, doctors, lawyers, dentists, engineers, technical professions that kind of, very well respected middle class professions with, a lot of kind of qualifications. These can be really, really good. So schools, degrees, qualifications, they can be really good for certain professions. Um, Brands and products, I mean, this is like the main thing actually, and this is something that I really like to center my campaigns around. If you can find what people are buying in the niche, if you can focus on the money and make that a key part of your interest, then you're going to do well. And then there are also going to be other keywords in general that relate to your particular niche. So build up, use all these different sources, audience insights, Google searches, digging around, and just build up a list of words, of like keywords, of interest basically that you think might be on Facebook, then go over to Facebook ads and just start writing them in and see what comes up. Not all of them will. In fact, there'll be some that, are huge that won't come up, and then there'll be some that are very small that surprise you and do come up. So you just kind of have to build up a list and drop them into Facebook and see what happens. Finding Facebook interest, the overview of what we've kind of talked about. Don't spend a huge amount of time on this, because the truth is you're not really going to know if you've got it right until you actually launch your ad. And for like, if you spend like 5 hours on it and it turns out you're wrong, you kind of wasted a bit of time. If you spend like maybe 10 minutes to an hour and you kind of get it like 75% right, that's going to be more than sufficient for us to launch a campaign and see if it works. So use Google searches, use Facebook Audience Insights to find interest to target, build up an audience of like 100,000 to 1 million people, and make sure as well, by the way, and this is kind of a key point, make sure that the interests are closely related and kind of clustered around the same theme. So if you've got like 5 interests and one of them is like, let's say you've got like, say you were targeting, let's say pit bull dogs, and you had interest number 1 was San Diego Pit Bull Rescue Center. Interest number 2 was Los Angeles Pit Bull Rescue Center, San Francisco Pit Bull Rescue Center, San Diego Pit Bull Rescue Center. Those are super, super targeted. They're all saying the same thing. They're all rescue homes for pit bull dogs. But if you have like San Diego Pit Bull Rescue Center, pit bull lovers fan page, people who want to fight pit bulls, and Pitbull the rapper, and you kind of throw them all into this group. The problem is that you kind of got this pot of all these different ingredients, and when it doesn't taste good, when you kind of don't get good results, you're not going to know why that was. Was it because the rescue center bit didn't do good? Was it because the clothing bit didn't? You know what I mean. So you kind of want to keep your kind of interest centered around a single theme as much as possible. Some people recommend just having one interest. You go live with one interest, which is like, say, Pitbull, or if it's a mechanic, you just type in like mechanic, or you type in one mechanic school. Other people say, well, actually, we do want to have lots of interest, but we need to be able to get good data, and so we want to break them down into different ad sets. And then we can look at each ad set, not just the design in general, not just the campaign in general, but we can see how the design's performing to each individual theme. So they'll have like ad set number 1 is let's say magazines, and it'll be magazines that relate to mechanics. Ad set number 2 will be associations that relate to mechanics. Ad set number 3 will be people whose profession is a mechanic. Ad set number 4 will be people who like Mechanic magazine, Mechanic Forum. We've already had magazines, and they'll basically have like different ad sets, different groups of interest broken down into these different boxes, these different ad sets. And truthfully, that's probably the most scientific way to do it. But the problem you have is that it increases your costs by several times. So if you're testing like $10 overall on a design, for example, then really the most you're going to spend, unless you decide to, is $10 on that particular design, and that's going to tell you whether the rough campaign, that design in that niche, worked with the particular targeting you set up. But if you have like 4 different ad sets, then really you're probably going to want to spend at least $5 on each ad set, if not $10, which is going to mean that you're going to spend between $20 and $40 on a single design. So if you've got like 10 designs and you want to test them, then you could be spending a couple of $100 basically. So it's kind of a more expensive way to do it. It's probably a better way. It's probably more scientific. I do also do this at times. I do go into niches with several different ad sets. I kind of mix it up a little bit. Sometimes I'll go in with just one ad set with 3 different interests. Sometimes I'll go in with like different ad sets like I've just described. And by the way, an ad set is kind of like a group, like a subsection of your campaign. So it's got specific interest and specific targeting. But yeah, basically overall, I think for you guys starting out, having one interest is probably going to limit you too much, and having multiple ad sets is going to be too expensive. So I suggest you go in with just one ad set, one campaign, with like between sort of two and five. Very very generally, you can do more. You can even just do one sometimes, but generally between two and five interests that particular. Uh, Within that kind of particular campaign. So to give you an overview of everything, campaigns and interest overview. So like I say, we probably want between one and five related interests for our campaign to start with. Tweak the demographics. If you know it's only targeting women, then only target women. If you know that it's only targeting mothers, then target people who are maybe slightly older, 40 and upwards at least. If you know it's a male profession, then only target males. But like, don't be going crazy. Don't be trying to work out, that there are more dentists in Manhattan, so you'll only target Manhattan, because you're just going to trip yourself up if you try and get too clever and make too many assumptions at this stage. So have a broad idea of what the demographic profile is going to be, but keep it quite broad. It's okay to refine your audience. So, we originally said when you did an audience of 100,000 to a million people, if you go in and you now realize that you actually only want to target women, and that drops the audience down to 50k, for example, it's not the end of the world. You can still proceed. 50k is not the hugest audience, but hopefully if it works, we can find other interests and other ways to scale it. So it's fine to kind of drop that 100k to a mil number down to sort of 50 to 300k. Just be aware though, you are going to slash it again after testing. So what will happen is your campaign will go live. You'll be targeting, for example, let's say it's a firefighter mom t-shirt, you'll be targeting females who are aged 50 and up and who are parents, and you'll go live and you look at the reports and you'll see that actually it's women who are aged 60 and up who are generating all the sales and all the traffic and all the interactions. And so then you'll go in and you'll only focus on women who are aged 60 and up. But what that'll do is it'll take your audience, which is say 100,000 people, and it'll drop it down to, let's say, 30,000 people. So that's why we kind of don't want to be too clever when it comes to being refined with our audience at the start, because the danger is, we cut it down by too much and we end up with just like this sliver, this 10k audience, which we can't really do anything with. Try to keep your campaign simple at the start, so it should be like, what's your campaign about? You should really be able to describe it. Women who like pit bulls, accountants, moms of firefighters. Think of it almost as a stereotype of your audience and try and keep it quite broad. So if your audience is described as like engineers who love hip hop and work in Detroit, but then occasionally visit Japan, that's just, a far too targeted audience for you to start with, and you've got far too many assumptions there about your audience. It needs to be really quite broad in terms of demographics, in terms of interest, but in particular with demographics, don't have too many assumptions when you start, and then we can test it, and then we can see, what the data actually is. So hopefully this video was useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.